There's a day of ultimatums here in Ottawa coming from the leader of the Bloc Québécois, who says that the Prime Minister, his Chief of Staff, and his Finance Minister must all resign over the We charity, or he's going to push for an election. Now, this call from Yves-François Blanchet comes as two more cabinet ministers were before committee today, being grilled over the decision to have a charity with ties to the government run a student grant program worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The CBC's national affairs editor, Chris Hall, has been following all of this today, and he joins me now from Ottawa. So, Chris, let's start with this threat from Yves-François Blanchet. What should we make of this?
Well, it's interesting. It's not the first time that he said that the We scandal should require resignations, and he'd be prepared to put forward a motion of non-confidence. But what's interesting here is he's expanded it now, not just from politicians, but to a chief of staff, Katie Telford. This because her husband worked for a private mortgage company that was given the contract by Canada Mortgage and Housing to administer or to run the commercial rent relief program. So think about the context here. The fall, the pandemic, the worst of it may have passed, but there's still the recovery that has to come. The Conservatives, he needs their support and the New Democrats in order to bring down the government. New Democrats haven't been consulted and believe really the priority should be to focus on getting benefits to people who still need them, including what happens when CERB begins to expire in September and people start to shift to employment insurance. Aaron O'Toole, one of the candidates, said he's open to the idea because this is a tired, scandal-ridden government, but really he can't make that decision until or unless he's elected. So I'm not certain how serious people are taking it. I didn't get the sense from talking to Liberals today that anybody's putting their running shoes in a basket.
Yeah, it seems crazy to talk about going back to the polls when we're not even sure if kids can go back to school safely just yet. But, you know, this is a political scandal. We hear a lot of rhetoric. So this was the threat today from Yves-François Blanchet at committee today. Mary Ng and Ministers Carla Qualtrough, they were before the Finance Committee. What were the MPs asking them?
Yeah, interesting. Carla Qualtrough, I know, is coming on next. She was asked about the comments that she made yesterday before the Ethics Committee that say that they dropped the ball when it came to reviewing the We contract. And certainly Mary Ng, first time she's actually been before committee to talk about her role. We had reached out to her because it's based in her Markham riding back as early as 2018 and then followed up with this social entrepreneurship program. She didn't have much to do with it. Her department didn't recommend going forward with the project, but it did appear later on as this youth entrepreneurship and volunteer program. So all of these things make some question about whether the due diligence was done. We're still waiting for those documents, David, that the Prime Minister's office provided, about 5,000 pages to decide to show what was done after the Prime Minister said he put the brakes on the proposal on May 8th before Cabinet and the following 2 weeks when it came back, and neither he nor Bill Morneau recused themselves. And really, David, if they maybe paid a wee bit more attention around the Cabinet table to some of these details, we wouldn't have the We controversy affecting the Prime Minister, his Finance Minister, and the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff.
Okay, Chris, thanks so much. That's the CBC's Chris Hall, our national affairs editor. All right, so Chris was watching all of those committee hearings today. One of the people appearing and testifying was Carla Qualtrough, the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Disability Inclusion, and she joins us now from Delta, British Columbia. Minister, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you.
I want to start with at the Ethics Committee yesterday, you said you knew nothing about the Prime Minister's ties to We, other than the fact that he and his wife had spoken at various events. Wouldn't that have been enough to know that maybe he should have recused himself from this?
To be honest, no. I had participated in one event for We. I know of other politicians from other parties, premiers. Many of us have taken the opportunity to speak to young people through We. And so, no, that in and of itself, certainly for me, did not raise alarms.
Okay, so you said yesterday that the government dropped the ball. That was sort of the headline phrase that you used that people seized on here. And right now we are in this situation where the program is not working and money is not being sent to students who want to volunteer. And it happens when the latest employment numbers show us that youth unemployment is still pretty terrible in the pandemic, despite some of the recovery that we have seen with reopening. So can you use this money that you had set aside to just do direct transfers to students to help them get the money they need with tuition bills coming due in just a few weeks?
Yeah, so we already have a part of a component of our student measures that's doing just that, the Canadian Emergency Student Benefit, which is $1,250 to $2,000 a month, depending on if you have children or you have a disability. 860, I think, thousand students are right now on that benefit. Really, really successful. Over $5 billion has been spent. We were trying to have a service component to add to that. So the idea being you're on the benefit, you're at home, you're not working, you couldn't find a job. We were trying to have have an opportunity for young people to go out into their communities and volunteer because we'd heard that they wanted to. But remember, this was a big complex kind of complementary suite of measures that were intended to be stacked, that were intended to work together. You get the CESB, there's a moratorium on student loan payments, there's additional student grants available through Canada Student Loans in the fall. You get to earn $1,000 a month. But these were all supposed to work together.
Right, but now the big student volunteer grant can't stack, and it looks like it's going to lapse. I mean, is there something you can do before university starts in the fall and the big bills come due to mobilize that money and get it to the students who need it?
And that's exactly what we're looking at doing. So those of us who might have programs within our portfolios are putting together some suggestions. Minister Chagger is obviously quarterbacking this, but we're all looking at what we can do. Is it job creation? Is it additional money to Canada Student Loans? Do we extend the moratorium? There's a whole bunch of different things we can do. And we're trying to figure out what's best to do now. There won't be a Canada Student Service Grant program. We've missed that opportunity. It's very regretful. I was a big fan of the concept of the program. But this is where we are, and we're trying to make the best of it. And yes, we're definitely committed to continuing to put those investments into students.
Okay, I want to dig into something the Prime Minister said when he testified a while back at committee. He said that on May 8th, he put the brakes on the approval of the program because he wanted to make sure and double check this public service's assertion that only the WE organization could deliver this program. But WE was told at May 5th that they could start doing work on the program. How could he pump the brakes 3 days after WE was given the green light?
Well, here's a couple of things. So WE was completely doing that at their own risk. They didn't have a contract with the Government of Canada, that we hadn't approved it at Cabinet. I know that was made very clear to them as well at that point. They decided to move forward hoping this would all turn out the way they wanted to, but there was a possibility that it wouldn't. And that risk was completely assumed by then. We had a COVID Cabinet committee on the 5th of May. I was part of that committee meeting. We thought it would be brought to Cabinet on the 8th. It was pulled from the agenda. I certainly didn't know at the time why it was pulled, but it wasn't uncommon in the craziness of the time to have something more important kind of make its way up to the top of an agenda any given day. And now I've subsequently learned, remember, this wasn't my file, that the Prime Minister had asked for more due diligence. We then saw it at Cabinet on the 22nd of May. And again, it was a robust proposal recommendation by the Minister of Diversity and Inclusion and Youth that we deliver this particular program.
So WE was doing this at its own risk on the 5th, but once the Prime Minister put the pause button on the 8th, were they allowed to just keep doing the work at their own risk? Would it not have been, did anybody tell WE to hold off? We're taking another look at this?
Well, and I'm not sure, to be honest with you, because it wasn't my file. So there very well may have been conversation where we was told very clearly that, again, anything you're doing right now is at your own risk. These expenses won't be reimbursed if this program doesn't go forward. There's a contribution agreement that will need to be negotiated. Eligible expenses will need to be defined. But what I will say is, in this time of pandemic, it has not been uncommon for organizations to start putting ducks in a row. I think of the Community Support Fund with Community Foundations Canada, United Way, Red Cross. I mean, we wanted these things to hit the ground running, and organizations were prepared, almost in good faith, but I wouldn't say it was even that solid, to start this process and not proceed with it if the Cabinet had made the decision not to go.
So all of this has created, obviously, some political difficulties for the government. You've heard what Mr. Blanchet said today, that if the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, and the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, Ms. Telford, do not quit, he's going to try to bring down the government at the earliest opportunity, likely in October. Has all of this put your government at risk of being defeated?
I don't personally think so. I've had a very good working relationship myself on my really big files during this pandemic with all the opposition parties. You know, some of it is theater in QP, in committee, even in press conferences. I don't think this certainly didn't cause me to worry. His comments today, it means I have to work harder to make sure that my Bloc critic is on board with the things I want to do, and we talk regularly. But quite frankly, I think the biggest regret I have about all this is that this is what we're talking about instead of the really important work. We know it was a $9 billion package of measures for students, and we're talking about one aspect. We're not talking about the other $8 billion that we're investing in young people.
Okay, I know this isn't directly your file. I do want to ask you about something that is directly your file. Earlier this week, you announced changes to employment insurance, making it easier for people to qualify in different regions of lower unemployment, extending their benefits. There has been a lot of talk about the CERB, the Emergency Response Benefit, transitioning to employment insurance. Is this the plan, or is this just one measure with more to come?
This is definitely just one measure with more to come. So the week before last, the Prime Minister set forth a framework of what's to come. So we are going to transition as many Canadians as possible into EI. We are relaxing some of the eligibility criteria. We've automated a lot of the processes for people who, regardless of this, and your point is valid. Monday was an important step. Setting the national unemployment rate at 13.1% means everybody across the country will have the same eligibility requirements with the lowest number of hours required, with the maximum number of weeks, 26 to 45 for everybody. Nobody will go under 26 weeks. That in and of itself was big, but there's definitely more to come.
So more to come, and I know the hope is to transition off of CERB, but we are going into the fall, and this is the period of time when people pointed to the possibility of a second wave. So if we do end up in a situation where lockdowns are required again, does CERB come back? Is that a lever you can pull again if you need it?
Well, the Prime Minister also announced the creation of a parallel benefit for people who don't, regardless of how much we relax the EI system, still get into that system. And that system has so many benefits compared to the clunkiness and cliff that's established in the CERB. But the thinking, quite frankly, is having the system set up the way we're setting it up, we'll be able to respond very nimbly and quickly to second wave, to outbreaks in different regions. You know, if your region's in phase 1 and you go to phase 2 and back to phase 1, you're still going to have access to this other benefit. We're going to have a caregiver element to it, a sickness benefit element to it. The point really is not to leave anybody behind, but times are different. The CERB was created when we were asking people to stay home. As you said, we're now hoping and asking people to, go to work if they can, if it's reasonable to do so. And having, delivering so much of this through EI will allow us to have the sophistication. As old and clunky as that system is, I've come to really appreciate the EI system comparatively, working well on claim, training opportunities. There's so many different things that EI can offer people.
Okay, Minister Qualtrough, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
That's Employment Minister Carla Qualtrough speaking to us from Delta, British Columbia.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.